Hi, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to today's Zonos webinar, where we will be talking about the 2022 World Customs Organization updates and our Classify tool and some of its new features. We'll be referencing links and websites throughout the webinar, so keep an eye out for a follow-up email where we'll provide all of those links for you. If you have questions, ask questions in the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll try to get to those at the end. I know some of you ask questions throughout the registration process, and we'll try to get to those as well. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with an answer to your question via email by the end of the week. Start things off with some quick introductions. My name is Chanel Barnes. I've been at Zonos a little under 2 years, and I've spent the last year and a half as the product manager over our automated classification tool, Classify. Kyle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, first let me say it is very good to be with all of you here today. And we're excited about these changes and about Classify as well. My name's Kyle Eardley. And I've been at Zonos now for 7 years, almost 7 years. And I've been working on this Classify project now for about 3 years, and we're definitely excited about it.
Great. So I want to kick things off from a high level on what an HS code is, just to give those of you that may be less familiar with HS codes and the classification process, the context you'll need to follow along as we talk about the WCO and our automated classification tool. So what is an HS code? An HS code, or a harmonized code, is an internationally recognized part number, as we like to say. It's used by all WCO countries, which is over 180 countries, and HS codes help to quickly identify products and also assign duties and taxes and a few other reasons that Kyle will talk about here in just a second. So the first 6 digits of a code, the chapter, heading, and subheading, are internationally recognized. The final 4 digits are country specific. That number can vary from anywhere to the final 8 to 12 digits, depending on the country. So Kyle, talk to us about why HS codes need to be so accurate, specifically from a customs perspective.
Yeah, so this is actually a really important question. HS codes can be thought of as kind of the key code to unlocking international e-commerce. And so what countries will do is they'll use these codes to assign duties, they'll assign restrictions. So let's say if New Zealand wants to restrict some import, maybe wool import into New Zealand, they use the HS code to determine what that restriction looks like. It's also how statistical analysis is kept by countries and a lot of other sort of special carve-outs. So it's definitely very important. And then the other thing to understand about HS codes is customs officials around the world have indicated that they're going to start scrutinizing HS codes more carefully, even at the e-commerce level. So be aware that this is going to become only more important as time moves along. And so it is very important to know that we need accuracy here with HS codes for sure. And that's why they're so important.
So that's what HS codes are and why they're so important. So now we're going to talk about where these codes come from and who regulates these codes. So these codes are generated and created by the World Customs Organization, the WCO. They make changes to their tariff to the schedule every 5 years. So one's happening now in 2022, specifically on January 1st, 2022, they implemented these new codes to the 6th digit. And the reason they make changes to this tariff every 5 years is to create new HS codes for new products. On the flip side, remove HS codes from obsolete products. And lastly, to break apart previous HS codes for further visibility. We'll go through a few examples here in a minute. So now we're going to talk about the 3 steps you need to follow to be compliant and ensure that you are using up-to-date HS code classifications when you're shipping internationally. So the first step is to identify and stage your impacted parts. So you will need to review the WCO website and the changes. There's just over 350 amendments and changes to the 2022 updates in these following chapters and categories. The ones you see here that are bolded and underlined are the most impacted parts. So keep a close eye out for chemicals, textiles and clothing, automotive, and furniture. So here's a textile example, a consolidation example. So the 2017 version, you can see the 3 HS codes to the subheading international level. below, which were consolidated into one single subheading HS code 681299. The reason the WCO decided to consolidate was just to simplify due to a low volume of trade. So if you're shipping and you have HS codes in either of those first two HS codes, 681292 or 93, you will need to consolidate or map those codes to 681299. Here's an opposite example in the automotive chapter. The 2017 version, this subheading for this specific vehicle part was 870120. This is a generic vehicle subheading for all vehicles in 2017. So whether it's gas powered, hybrid, or electric, there was just this one single subheading. Due to the change of times and the expansion in the vehicle industry, the WCO decided to expand this subheading to 5 subheadings. So if you have any parts that you're currently shipping in 870120, you'll need to go to the WCO website and see which new subheading your part now falls under and assign that 6-digit HS code to it. Step 2, identify when countries update their HS codes. So the WCO announces all of their changes on January 1st, 2022, but those changes don't go into effect until each country decides to implement their country tariff codes. In a minute, we'll talk about how we can help with this, but it is worth emphasizing that this is the messiest step, and this is what makes this process so difficult. If only all countries updated their respective codes on January 1st, 2022, we could do it all in one swoop, and it would be a much easier process. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Some have updated since January 1st. A lot of countries will throughout the next couple of weeks or months. Some it takes years, and some actually don't end up updating at all. So Kyle, can you talk to us a little more about the country by country implementation process?
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, this is a messy process, right? So you can imagine, these countries get together and they have boards and customs officials that are in charge of making sure that these internationally agreed upon changes are implemented in their own country. But as we know, politics can get involved, and anytime when governments get together, it can be slow and cumbersome to get changes out. And that's what we see quite often with these WCO changes is that even though countries intend to change, January 1st, 2022, what really happens is they slowly change, they roll out changes. And there's actually kind of 2 levels of change, if you will. The first level, and an example of this is in the US itself, the first level is sort of the government decides to accept the change. So that's where we're at today in the United States, is the president has signed an order to accept the 2022 changes, and they will become the tariffs essentially that will govern duties and other things. But to actually finish implementing that, it usually takes a couple of months. So the US is in the process of implementing those changes, even though the government has signaled that they will make the change. It hasn't fully made the change yet. And usually in the US, we look to the end of Q1 to have the actual change hit. Now, some countries like Korea, for example, they've already changed over. Not only have they said they'll change, but they have changed over. And so the countries you see here on this page are examples of countries that are either in the process of changing like the US or have already changed like Korea. And so that can be messy, like Chanel said. It can be messy to try to figure out who's changed and who hasn't. And so that's part of what we do, is we try to help with that messy process of the change that countries go through. So this brings up the necessity to reclassify. And Chanel's already spoken to this to some degree. And the fact is you're going to have catalogs that are going to have impacted areas of the tariff schedule. And so it will be incumbent upon you all to reclassify those catalog items and to get up to date with the changes. Now that's really hard, because if you take into account the fact that each country hasn't changed and you have to kind of keep track of where each country is and all that kind of stuff, that can get really onerous and really difficult. And so you want to go to the next slide. Here's an example to Korea. We're using Korea because they have changed, like I said. I looked this one up, and it's actually some kind of asbestos paper item that used to live in the 2017 code, this 6812.92. And that has been deprecated. So that no longer is a code that is recognized by Korea. So if you were to ship something that had that code, then they would either reject it, or you would have a holdup at the border, or you would have a fine to pay until the correct classification was made on that item. So the new classification for Korea is 6812.99. And so, like I said, it's hard to always know how to be up to speed with that. Now, I assume that customs officials at first will be somewhat lenient on e-commerce type orders, but we're not sure because that's country by country and person by person. So that's kind of where we're at with those changes.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. So how can we help? There are a few things we can do. The first is you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, where we will compile a list throughout the duration of the month of countries who have implemented their changes and notify you via email. So that you can then identify the countries that have implemented their updates, see if you ship to any of those countries, and then implement the updates on your end. If you don't want to wait until the end of the month and you want to be a little more proactive, you can check our 2022 tracker document at docs.zonos.com, or again, we'll send you a link to that later on, where you can review daily. We'll keep it up to date every day on any countries that have updated. And then lastly, if you have the means or resources to update classifications on your end, then great. But if you need help reclassifying your impacted products, we can do that with our automated classification tool, Classify. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our tool Classify and how it works. Again, as mentioned, it's an automated HS code classification tool that you can generate your classification with as little as an item description. As many of you may know, manual classifying is expensive and time consuming. And if you've had to do it on your own, it's very mundane and again, very time consuming and difficult. So we've built a tool built on machine learning and natural language processing that helps to automate this process. So again, it works with as little as an item description or an image URL, but we always encourage our users to provide as much detail as possible. The more detail you provide, the more accurate your HS codes are going to be. By default, Classify returns a 6-digit HS code, again, that international code. But if you provide the ship to country, then it will return the 10 digits, again, sometimes 8 to 12-digit country specific code. And as Kyle talked about, as soon as a country implements their 2022 WCO changes, we'll be sure to return those up-to-date accurate HS codes. So Kyle, talk to us about how the Classify technology works under the hood.
Yeah, so the short and easy answer to this is it's complicated, right? This is a hard process. And so what we've done is we've taken all the best knowledge, both from industry experts and from our in-house teams and all that we could get. And we built Classify based on kind of some foundational pillars, if you will. And so Chanel mentioned natural language processing. You know, what parts of speech matter most in a description, right? Do nouns matter most? Do adverbs, do adjectives, how they interact, does that matter? So we do natural language processing to help with that. We also can make customizations down to the store level, so that we can, like if someone has a clever marketing term they use for their shoes, you know, or whatever the case, we can go ahead and add marketing level classification detail that helps each store classify properly. We also use advanced image recognition, as Chanel was mentioning before. So we read the image. If you pass us an image, we read that image. And then that image gives us key terms, keywords that then we can make matches on. And so if we can make matches both with the image and with the description, and those matches correlate, then we have a really strong match that we call a crossover match. And that's important for our confidence scoring. So if we get crossover matches and we do those kind of things, and we feel confident that we have that figured out, that item is figured out. And it's important to note, we do use a machine learning and human in the loop kind of process. So we think that that's the right solution for this complex problem. We use machine learning where we can get wins from it, maybe stuff we don't quite understand yet. and we use a human in the loop to help modify and synthesize that and control the results so that we get the best possible results we can. And that in a nutshell is how Classify works. So how does a store access Classify? Well, there's really kind of three main ways. Simply through a backend, your catalog backend communicating with our Classify backend through an API call. I'm assuming that most are familiar with that term. Those two entities can talk and you can send us your data that way. We also have, and we'll be showing you just in a moment, a dashboard. So a graphical user interface that allows people to enter their data, whether it be one at a time, just to see how Classify works and get familiar with it, or as a bulk upload. So you can upload up to 5,000 items at a time, and we handle it right there in the dashboard. So now we're going to take a look at what the dashboard looks like. So this is the current state of our dashboard with Classify. So on the left, you can see that is kind of that idea of adding one at a time, right? So you have the describe your item, you choose a destination country. You can add more rich data to that request by adding an image or a detailed description or a category. And there's lots of options. We also handle foreign languages here. So just know that, let's say the input were in Spanish or some other language, we can process that on the fly. We can also put the output in the foreign language as well, if that's what's required. And there's a place where that can be toggled there in the dashboard. Now on the right, what you have is the bulk uploader. So what we do here is we allow a file to be uploaded, either dragged in place or just simply attached. And then a formatting prompt opens. And then you essentially may have to do a little formatting, and then your catalog can be uploaded. And then we will process that catalog and then make it available for download when it's done. Sometimes it takes a little while, maybe a couple of hours, depending on the size of the catalog, or even a day or two if it's very large, but we do process lots of catalogs that way. So, and we're really excited to say that we do have our own catalog feature coming soon. We will be keeping a repository of classifications with this cataloging tool, along with the ability to control your catalog items themselves. And this is a feature that will continue to grow, and its ability will expand over time as we build this project out. And so we're definitely very excited about this, and this is coming soon. And I believe, Chanel, I think we had a few questions in the run-up to the webinar that you had received. And so if you've got those.
Yes, we do. Okay, first question here. Considering the technical nature of apparel classification, how is the auto classify function able to do so with a picture or an item name?
Yeah, so apparel is a good example of something that is very technical, right? And there are other things. There are other sections of the HS tariff schedules that are complex. Some are less complex. But apparel is one of those things that is more complex. And so we just so happen to have a whole lot of data associated with apparel. We have lots of customers that sell apparel. We have lots of access to other apparel data. And so from the machine learning perspective, we're able to use that rich data to help build the context for Classify. It's also something that's fairly easily understood by humans in the loop. And so we're able to make small distinctions between, a cotton t-shirt and a cotton poly t-shirt, right? Because sometimes those will classify differently. And so we don't always have in a description, we don't always have all the data we need to make really fine distinction, but a lot of times we do. And if we have that, then we do come up with the right answer most of the time, for sure. So yeah, that's kind of the answer. Lots of data, lots of effort, and lots of human curation, it really is the answer.
Great. Okay, next question. Will there be anything we need to change on our end, or will Zonos be handling everything?
Right, yeah, good question. So that really depends on how you want to handle it. So if this is something you want to handle on your own, which can be done, you'll need to do what Chanel had suggested earlier. You'll need to go to the WCO, figure out kind of what was affected. make those changes to your catalog at the international level. Then you'll need to figure out at the country specific level, who is currently using 2022, who's still using 2017. We actually have examples of countries that are still on 2012 and others before that. So it's a little hard it can be hard to manage that process, as you can imagine. But that's kind of the short answer to that. It can go either way. We can help you with our Classify tool. We even offer some human classification services if that's what's required. So we have lots of options out there for sure to handle that problem.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, next question. This is a fun one. What are some of the new products that have been added to the 2022 schedule?
Okay, so a lot of times what happens with these schedules is old technologies get deprecated, right? And new technologies come online. And that's a lot of what the changes are. Sometimes the changes are more related to countries wanting to be more specific about and more granular about certain things they want to be able to separate. But usually it's technology related. And so, for example, typewriters are no longer in their own subheading. They have been moved into sort of like machines, electrical machines, right? And that kind of thing. A new category is drones, so UAV drones, so drone type of things. Those in the past, in 2017 and before, were classified as toys, a type of toy, and now they have their own section and their own heading even. So they're very separated from everything else, just simply because the technology is there and lots of people are buying them, and so countries want to be able to track these things too, right? They want to be able to keep statistics on these items. And if they want to, and if they need to charge a different duty rate on some of this, maybe they don't like, drones in their country or something, then they want to be able to do that. So that's really where these sections tend to change. And now one other quick note I'll say is the WCO, they do focus areas. And so as Chanel was saying earlier, automotive and some other things have been changed, like furniture. They tend to focus on certain areas at a time for each 5-year transition period. And so this time they focused on those areas. So probably what they did is they said, let's get really granular with automotive parts and automotive items, and let's make these changes that are necessary, both from a technological perspective and from a let's be more granular type of perspective. So that's kind of the answer to that.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, a couple questions that came in the chat box here. One is Classify readily available on Zonos dashboard for all Zonos users, or is it an extra feature to subscribe to? I can take this one.
Yeah.
If you're a Zonos user right now, you have access. You'll see Classify on the sidebar there on the left, and you have access to 5 free classifications. And then from there, it is an extra feature that you'll need to subscribe to. So reach out to your sales or CS representative for that. But it is readily available for all Zonos users. Okay, Kyle, I think we have time for one more that came in the chat box here. How specific must the input data be for a Classify request?
Super good question. So it's really, this is kind of an answer by degrees, right? And so the quality of the outcome largely can depend on the quality of the input, right? So if we get like that idea of the cotton t-shirt versus the cotton poly t-shirt, if it's important, to your product catalog, that we need to make a distinction there. Maybe some country charges a different rate for cotton poly compared to cotton. Maybe they have a cotton industry they're trying to protect, who knows? But basically, if we have the data, we will use the data, and we'll make a more granular, a more fine-tuned sort of response. And we do have that ability. If it's less sort of accurate, sort of more, maybe it's more of a marketing kind of description, and maybe it's not super accurate to what the item is, we handle those as well. Though what happens with those is there are some areas, like a cotton t-shirt is going to be a more prevalent area, a more prevalent HS code than a satin shirt, right? And so if there's not enough information to sort of determine what type of shirt it is, we fall back to the more prevalent type of distinction. So that's kind of how we handle those things.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, we have quite a few questions we didn't get to. Again, we will follow up and answer all of those questions personally via email by the end of the week. And thank you, Kyle, and thank you to everyone who attended this webinar. We hope it was helpful.
Thanks, everyone. It was good to be here.